Hello and welcome to another session of Mobile UX Marathon Week. Thank you for the overwhelming response that you guys have given for the last two webinars.
Hello and welcome to another session of Mobile UX Marathon Week.
We've had over 4,000 to 5,000 views on some of our videos, and I've got very good engagement, asking really high quality questions that is making us also think in terms of what is the best way to answer that. Today, we have a very interesting session. We will be talking about CRO maturity, which stands for conversion rate optimization maturity, organizational excellence, and what are the best qualitative methods to identify what UX works best for you. With us today, we have Anna, who is a mobile user experience specialist, and Louis, who is a conversion and UX specialist. They are coming to us live from Dublin. So let's hear from them. Hey, Anna and Louis.
Hello, everyone. Hello,
Hi.
hello. You may have already seen myself and Louise in the pre-recorded videos. We are a team of user experience specialists based in Dublin, and we are working with different markets, different companies, and what we're doing, we're trying to help them to improve user experience and conversion rates on the mobile web.
Thank you so much for that, Anna. So quickly going over today's agenda. So welcome back to UX Marathon. We'll start off with a recap of the pre-recorded video that we had uploaded on the channel, and hopefully you guys have gone through that. Post that, we'll talk about what is the mindset that we need to have at an individual, at an org level, while creating great UX, right? Again, a quick reminder, this is a 7-week program. This is, you're on session 3. If you missed the previous sessions, pre-recorded videos, the recorded videos are uploaded on our channel, Conversions at Google. So please go and check them out. This is open to everyone again. So if you can ask your friends, you can ask your colleagues who you think can find value in this webinar. Please ask them to register and join in. We have 3 more sessions left after this. Next week is going to be measurements, and after that A/B testing with Google Optimize, and then at the end we are going to focus exclusively on progressive web app technologies. So I'm sure progressive web app and AMP technologies. There were a few questions last time and a couple of other sessions where you guys were asking about PW and AMP in detail. So that would be the right session for you guys to also join in. Moving on, in terms of the feedback that you guys had shared with us last time, was having more time for Q&A. So we have taken that, and this session we'll try to keep relatively shorter and have enough time for any Q&As, any questions that you guys might have. We have pre-received questions that we'll be taking in this session. But at the same time, please feel free to ask any questions that you may think of in the live comment section on the live stream. We have also tried to include examples from various industries and not just retail. And the third feedback was maybe you guys can start local meetups. That's something that we are exploring in India and Southeast Asia level. And we can't promise anything at the moment, but that's something that we can actively look at, because events is something that we always conduct. If you're registered on the events at Google, you will get the relevant feedback. With that, I hand it over to Louis to go through the recap of the recorded videos.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm just going to do a quick recap on the two webinars that I did as part of this series. The first one was on CRO maturity, and I suppose the goal behind that video was to try and help companies understand where they were with regards to their CRO efforts, and the idea behind that was to give them a framework that they could use to help grow and improve and mature with regards to what they were doing with their CRO. And the reason being is that we have found in our roles that some companies have struggled to kind of progress because they haven't been able to understand where the gaps are and what it is that they're doing. So the idea behind this framework is to help you identify what those gaps are, and then work towards improving them. The second series then was on the qualitative and quantitative research methods that you could do. And again, the reason for this was that we found that clients were struggling with understanding what was within their current limitations. And we thought that kind of fit in quite well with the maturity framework that we were using. So what we've done in that video is we have listed for you the types of methods that you could be using based on your maturity or your current maturity. And the goal here is to help you grow and make sure that you're working in a way where you're gathering as much both qualitative and quantitative data on your users.
Great. So, and the other two videos that we recorded for this session as a homework was one of them was by Emily, and where she basically explained some basics of design sprints. And design sprints, it is a methodology that you can apply to solving any business problems. So you can do design sprints on strategy, on improving processes. On our team, we are applying design sprints to solve UI problems, and specifically to improve user experience on your websites. And in that video, Emily, she actually she's offering you a framework how you can apply design sprint to optimizing your website. And in the last video, Some, also our colleague based in Dublin, she explained how to start with user research and what are the key steps that you need to consider, that you need to take in order to do it properly. And we are focusing in today's session on the qualitative methods of UX, because we're going to have two more live streams dedicated just to quantitative, right, to A/B testing and measurement. So today we really want to look into how important it is to do the user research, user testing, and all those qualitative methods, and how they are crucial to really driving the mindset within your organization. Now, giving it back to Rajesh.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Anna and Louis. So, all right. So today we'll be talking about what mindset do we need to have to we need to create a great UX. So with that, hand it over to Anna. So Anna, if you could take us through that, that'll be great.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rajesh. So what mindset do we need to have to create a great user experience? This was actually one of the pre-submitted questions that we saw submitted on the website through the form. And hopefully by the end of my presentation, you will be able to understand why exactly we decided to select this question as a follow-up to pre-recorded videos on CRO maturity and qualitative methods of UX. So yeah, let's first maybe start with taking a closer look at problems. There is a research that was recently done by Conversion Excel team, and it says basically that A/B testing is only 20% of conversion rate optimization process. So what else is really there? Okay, well, about 20% of your time you do spend on designing, developing, and running tests and reporting on those things, right? Also, about 20% you look into data and try to analyze it, interpret, and get insights, right? And the rest. So what is all of this gray area? So this is actually internal politics and stakeholder management that we all have to deal with. And yeah, it's all about people we are working with and how we are good at communicating to those people. And the majority of our time goes into talking to people just because we are maybe not really efficient at these things. And I can maybe, like, if we go to the next slide, narrow it down to 3 things, right? So the first thing is just how good we are at running tests. And again, we're going to have a separate live stream on A/B testing devoted just to that. But the other 2 buckets is all about how good we are at really understanding the problem of the user and how good we are at talking to each other. So the other two buckets, right? So this is what we're going to speak about today in the qualitative methods and the culture and the mindset piece. And we do consider these things, these problems to be, fundamental for the mindset. And if we go to the next slide, we will basically see like some sort of the framework that we suggest to answer this question, what mindset we need to have to create a good UX. So the first one is be curious about your audience and get really good at understanding the problems on the page, the problems in your conversion funnel, the problems of your user. The second one is learn how to get feedback. And here I mean product feedback, right? So you don't have to take things personally. You don't have to prove all your ideas win. And the last piece is, it's probably the most important, it's the whole company has to work together. And this is, again, the piece that which is related to the stakeholders. So let's start from the first one, be curious about your audience. And here we can say that user research really comes in and helps you to go deep into understanding the key problems. And it's really important that user research department, right, or a user research person that is there in your organization, that their voice is heard over product development, over any other department, because that's how we really constantly check ourselves. Are we doing the right thing? Are we going in the right direction? So let's, we want to keep the majority of our time to Q&A, and today we're only going to discuss the case study. So I'm happy to present you the case study of YouTube Go. And this is the story, basically a 2-year journey that resulted into a video streaming app specifically for emerging market users. And so according to different studies, people in India, one of the emerging markets where the Google UX research team went, they used quite a lot prepaid data plans. And YouTube team research participants, they described that basically buying data from a local kiosk or carefully planning how to spend it was basically crucial to them, right? And the Google UX team, they continued their research and they watched how participants basically search for the videos, how they start videos, and then how quickly they realize it's not the video that they wanted and they would click to another result, right? And the first concept that the team was testing was just, decrease the quality of the videos, right? So this is what you do when the data is really expensive. That was kind of the first hypothesis. And unsurprisingly, participants reacted really strongly against this concept. There is the quote from one of the participants: just because I have less data, it doesn't mean I want a bad experience. Video is video. And then they started testing other concepts. So for example, on the screenshot, you can see how they basically redesigned the home feed of the app to show exactly how much data each video is going to cost them. For example, here, the downloading, you can download the selected video for 2 megabytes. And then they continued their research, and they found that, people would be very picky about different videos, and they probably need more than one just thumbnail to decide whether the video is worth the data they pay for. And to solve for this, they developed this kind of preview pop-up window. It was a new feature that allowed basically users to see the key frames of the video to get a better sense of what the video is about before deciding if they want to go and spend data on downloading that one. So the preview, the model window included the size of the file. It also allowed users to calculate the exact cost of the video. So it was really, really, driving user-informed decisions. And the last piece of the research that I wanted to present, and I think this is really, really exciting, and we can make a lot of references to the functionality on the mobile web. So throughout India, Nigeria, Indonesia, they noticed that participants, they often searched throughout their friends' video gallery. They were not really browsing on the internet, but they wanted to see curated lists of what their friends usually watch, right? And that's how users basically preferred recommendations from other people rather than YouTube suggested content. And in order to drive to keep this momentum, basically the YouTube team, they introduced the offline capability. And when, for example, people are on the train, they could be sharing different videos with each other offline. And I think this is a really exciting example because, for example, at the moment, the offline functionality is available with the progressive web apps technology on the web. And this is just one of the ideas how you can turn the offline connection into the advantage by introducing the new functionality. So now you can go and think about how offline experience on the web can look like for your user. So make sure to dial into our live stream on June 11th, where we will discuss the progressive web technology for UX. Moving on to the next thing, and that is all about being curious about your audience and getting better about understanding your problem. Oh, sorry. So the next piece is actually learning about how to interpret data correctly. And here again, it's all about don't take things personally. I'm going to stay here at very high level because we're going to have 2 more live streams on quantitative methods. But here I want to focus on the mindset problem and the mentality. So again, even highly trained statisticians make mistakes when they look into data, and that's about the quantitative data. Regarding the qualitative data, there is even so-called researcher bias, right? So how good we are at conducting research, at understanding what people mean, and not pushing our assumptions on that research on them. So the reason why people really make these mistakes is because we're all human beings. And this is what people do. They just want to prove that their own ideas work. They want to see a positive outcome from an A/B test. They want to conduct the user research and prove that their idea worked. And, you just really need to be aware of these biases, that they exist. And in product, sometimes there can be people with so-called Steve Jobs effect, when you have 1 PM and they are translating their vision onto everyone, not really listening. So this is not the right approach, and you really need to learn how to celebrate mistakes, celebrate failed A/B tests, because it was actually a good idea to run this test and see the negative outcome rather than just launch this change directly to the interface and never know that this wasn't a good one. So the objective of conversion rate optimization, of UX optimization, is to learn and not to win, not to prove your ideas are great. Do invest into your own knowledge, into your subject matter expertise, whether it's analytics, statistics, user research, or product management. But try at the same time to be humble, try to understand how your own bias is affecting the process, learn how to deal with failures on a constant basis, and celebrate mistakes. And the truth here is, in order to achieve that, you need to, yes, change your own mindset, but also the mindset of people around you, which brings us to the next thing, the culture piece, and to the fact that the whole company has to work together. So when we speak to UX designers, they would always agree with us and say, yeah, we know the animated carousel on the homepage is not good for the user. But, we also have a marketing department, and they are super sure about having this carousel on the homepage right above the fold. So it's really comes down to this kind of internal politics and cross-functional management and different priorities that different departments have. So what you really need to change here is the culture of your company and get that A/B testing mentality where it's okay to fail and okay to move on. And one of the things that you can try is to, for example, practice design sprint methods. And the design sprints, they will help you to achieve both fast and agile learning and getting everyone to the room. right? So here I'm just going to quickly remind you about the key principles of the design sprint. So again, it's a mix of methods from psychology, strategy, and user research. And the first concept on the left-hand side is getting feedback at the very early stage before you go into production. It allows you to fail cheaply and in low fidelity, to fail fast, to learn from these failures, and then to move on. And the second concept of divergent and convergent thinking allows you not only to explore the new terrain, but also to build the confidence behind your team that you are doing the right thing. Because, you know, you basically, according to the methodology of design sprints, you ask everybody to be in the room, everybody to brainstorm, and everybody to agree on how things should be. It enables stakeholders from a wide range of disciplines to participate in the process. UX is going to be responsible for what user wants, what's desirable. Business is going to be responsible, you know, bringing perspective of what's profitable. Engineers, what's feasible. So all in all, it's going to just dramatically decrease the number of time we spend on communicating on these things in real life and increase the number of ideas that we all generate when we come together. And the task of design sprint facilitators is to create this kind of environment where people will have time and feel safe extracting pictures they have in their minds on how things should be. So I'm really excited to share another case study, hopefully another inspiration from you. And I know we received feedback that in the last live streams, we also have had maybe too much of retail examples. Here you go, example from insurance. We did have a chance to run a design sprint in South Africa. And so basically it was a one-day design sprint. We took companies through different best practices in the morning, and in the afternoon, they followed design sprint methodology and they did some prototyping. So One Life is an insurance company. They attended the sprint and they brought their agency along with an in-house team. And within that one day, you know, so usually design sprint, it's a 5-day, but again, we kind of condensed it to a 1-day sprint. But even within that 1 day, they were able to develop a completely new prototype of their landing page. And as you can see, it's really very nice. It has like they improved the imagery layout. They placed the entire form above the fold. The key call to action was now above the fold as well. The value proposition is also very nice and visual, structured with the key bullet points, complemented with icons. They've also fixed the header on the top of the page, and they fixed the main call to actions in it as well, so they're always available throughout the scrolling. So all in all, you know, this new page completely killed the original version, plus 65% to conversions from that page. But what really, you know, happened, we talked to the One Life team, and they were saying, well, we were very well aware of these best practices in mobile and landing page design, but we never really got a chance to sit down together and to agree that these changes are necessary. So this kind of 1-day design sprint where they got away from their day-to-day processes, it allowed them to agree that these changes are necessary to launch that split test, to see a really positive outcome, and then to work from there. So that is on design sprints, really exciting case study. But another point which is very important, which Louise has also covered in her videos on the CRO maturity, is the process, right? And here, this is like another attribute that you need to be looking at when you are trying to achieve excellence in the CRO. And here we see a clear need for companies to move from waterfall to agile and to make the whole company work this way, not only IT department. And agile methods, agile culture allow you to learn fast and to be able to change the direction quickly if needed. So we don't really want to go deep into agile because it can be basically another separate webinar hosted just in that. But I do want to present you one case study that was done by our colleagues in France. And this time it's actually from travel. So this is the case study, again, that our colleagues in France worked for 2 years with the company Club Med. It's a leading provider of premium packaged holidays in France. And the Google team was working with them to improve the mobile experience on their website. And Asia, and specifically China for them, was a really big business. And it was really difficult to reach. And it's a mobile first market, and sometimes not just mobile first, but mobile only. And basically what they decided to undertake this approach. They set up a team dedicated just to web performance, and they had 3 cross-functional teams with different focus areas. For example, one team focusing on checkout, another one on something else. And they had really, really different stakeholders from different departments working towards the same goal, sharing same KPIs. So this change allowed them to be more agile and to work closer with developers. Before, the teams were quite siloed. You know, developers would be working separately. There will be product, there will be UX, and now this kind of feature teams, if I can call them. So they, with one goal, they allow them to increase mobile conversions in general. And again, our colleagues in France, what they did, they shared different UX best practices with them. They conducted regular feedback sessions. They did user testing and they set up this constant A/B testing loop to check on the hypothesis and what really worked. By the way, they also worked on speed, and we covered in the first live stream session how speed is really important, and they've got really good results from that. So all in all, as a result of this transformational change and cross-functional efforts, they became more mature, and it fueled their mobile revenue grow by about plus 80%. Yeah, so that is an amazing case study. But the last important piece in the whole company has to work together is that C-level has to be in. So C-level has to work together with everyone. And they should be actually the biggest advocates of this agile culture, A/B testing culture, and the culture innovation that you can drive with design sprints, developer sprints, and so on. So I'm also happy to introduce you the CEO Mobile Checklist. It is a downloadable PDF that you can share now with your boss, or download it yourself if you are the CEO, if you're running the company. And this is kind of the set of list of things that we believe that the CEO should constantly check against if they want to set mobile as a priority, mobile UX as a priority for the company. So that was the last piece on the whole company work together. And I want to conclude this section with a quote saying, product excellence is a culture. Unfortunately, it's not another checklist that we can share with you. Excellence is a shared responsibility. It's all about taking pride in your work in order to be successful, pride of contributing to a great product, pride of working for a great company. And we need to make sure that it's built into the heart of everything that we do, into the heart of every employee, of every department. And I will probably repeat myself, but UX is not just designers, right? So when my team speaks to UX designers, they're always on the same page with us, but they constantly refer to other departments as, being having different other point of view. So UX is everyone's job. In fact, the whole business needs to be involved, and product excellence should be a culture where everybody is contributing to a great product, and everybody holds accountability of why is the animated carousel on the homepage, or I don't know, why the delivery is promised on the website as the next day, but it's not really the next day. I want to conclude this again. Hopefully now it's a bit more clear why we decided to unite all these things under the mindset. What mindset we need to have to create a good UX, right? I'm going to repeat it. 3 things. It's being curious about your audience, learning how to create feedback, and the whole company has to work together. And I just want to say that processes and all these kind of, again, checklists that we are sharing with you, they're nothing without the culture and nothing without the right mindset. Having the right mindset is essential. If you do have it, it hardly matters what tools and processes you're using. It's just kind of this innovation, again, mentality that makes things come out right. So yeah, that is it. That is all that I wanted to say. And we actually have exactly 30 minutes for the Q&A. I'm giving the floor back to Rajesh.
Thank you so much for that, Anna and Louis. That was very, very insightful and interesting. And I mean, even personally, I mean, somebody who has built products for almost close to 15 years, a lot of what you said, makes the difference between building a great product versus building a good product. And and thank you so much for that. So with that, we open the floor for Q&A. Like I said, we have some pre-submitted questions that we'll take right now. But at the same time, if you guys have any questions that you think was not answered either in the recorded videos or in the live stream, please feel free to use the live comment section on the on YouTube, and please ask us your questions. So we'll, if we have the time, we'll take a couple of questions for sure. So just going through the list of questions that we have. Right. So I think Anna, this is Anna and Louis. So this is a question that we typically see in an early stage startup, and in India and Southeast Asia, there are a lot of startups that are now maybe a year or 2 years old. When your resources are limited, right? And since you mentioned that user research is a very, very important part of design sprints or building great UX and product. But in a startup, I mean, usually the resources are limited. So if the resources are limited, what is the best way to approach user research, or what is the best way to get user insight?
I can take that one if you'd like.
Yeah.
So it's a really, really good question. I think it's relevant for not only startups, but even medium to large businesses. I think it's something that they can struggle with. So I think something like the CRO maturity model can help with something like this. So if you're in an early stage, the likes of guerrilla user testing is fantastic. And the reason being is it's very unofficial. So if you are tight on budget, tight on resources, you don't need to go and spend money on, renting out a user testing lab and using that, which is something that people may compare. So they may look at a large organization who is doing user testing and go, that's where we need to be. It's not. You can simply go outside and grab a few people and ask their opinion on something on your site. You can ask friends, you can ask family, and you can ask for volunteers. And it's not always about paying people either. Sometimes we've used the likes of Google Homes to get people in to do user testing, and I think they're €30 or something. So again, it's not about spending like vast amount of money. The key takeaway here is that you need to do user testing. It is so important at every part of your CRO activities. So at the very beginning, understanding what's the need, and throughout, if you have an idea or you have a hypothesis, test it. When you're designing, get them back in, test it again. And then when it's complete, test it again. And the reason being is when you don't have a user-first approach, your end product, it might not meet that need. So what's really important is that every part of your journey, at some stage, you're bringing in these users and you're doing this testing. And it does not mean investing heavily in user testing labs. If it means going outside and literally grabbing people off the street, do it. Use friends and use family. I think you can't underestimate the value of doing this. Ideally, yes, you would be looking for the ideal demographic. You would be in the right physical scenario. But that's always best case scenario. And I think it's more important that you actually just get feedback. I've done it myself where I've been blown away at the very early stages from getting this feedback, and it's been very guerrilla style, very unofficial. And it's completely changed the direction in which we have gone. And like Anna said, it's really important that you fail fast. Reason being is you're saving yourself a lot of time and money and effort. So user testing is super important. This is something that a lot of people struggle with. User testing is seen as a big investment by organizations, and it can be, but that's if you're, a more mature client with an enormous budget, C-level is bought in, and CRO is a part of your culture, and it's just a part of what you do. It's more likely you're going to be able to invest in it. So in most cases, I think it's harder to invest in it, in which case I would encourage you to use guerrilla style. And there is resources on the website around how you can go about doing that. But sometimes if I'm doing an audit and I feel I'm becoming a little bit biased, I actually might reach out to my team who, you know, they're not the ideal demographic because they're very experienced, they have an awful lot of knowledge, but they give me quick feedback that I might have missed. And that's the culture that you want to try and encourage throughout.
Yeah, I think can add this from the design sprints point of view. So the user research is really a crucial part of the design sprint methodology. And when we are running design sprints in Google Office, and you know, when we did not hire official users for that, we just send a quick email to everyone like, is anybody available for a quick 10-minute test? And like loads of people usually volunteer because they're keen to see and test prototypes and provide feedback. And it's really a fascinating process and seeing how differently people actually interact with your product. So yeah, it has to happen on a regular basis and be at the core of all your CRO processes.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. That makes a lot of sense. I think you know, it's also a lot about moving out of your comfort zone, because most of the times you're maybe in the comfort of your office, and it is important to go out on the field and you know, meet real customers. So sometimes that could also help. Moving on to the next question. So this is to do with you know, when it comes to quantitative analysis or quantitative testing, there's a lot of, you know, data that you can actually look at. But when it comes to qualitative methods, or you know, let's say user research or user interviews, what metrics do you think we can look at when we are you know, doing user research? And are there any tools that you would recommend? If yes, then you know, please help us with the tool. So that's the question. So again, the floor is open for both Anna and Lou, which please feel free to answer.
Probably fight over this one. Will I take it? So again, I actually love this question. I think this is a really, really good question, and it's something that I don't think we get asked enough, to be honest. So I think when you're doing the like of user testing, it really does depend on what it is that you're testing. So I can give you examples of some metrics, but I do think it does kind of vary depending on what it is. One of the metrics that you could use is completion time. So for example, timing a user. So you might have two variants of a form, for example, and you could get a user to fill out one form and the other form, and whatever one is completed in the quicker time, that could be a metric that you could use. For example, if it's a really, really long form and you're trying to make it an awful lot quicker, and your new version that you're testing against is shorter, completion time would be very relevant there. I think another one would be perception of tests, which I find really, really interesting. I don't know if you've seen this before, but sometimes when you're doing user testing and at the end you say, so how did you feel that went? They'll say to you, oh, it was fantastic. It was so good. It was brilliant design. I loved it. It looked great. And their positive kind of opinion of everything. And I suppose they're very biased. I think they think they're going to insult you if they're saying that it was rubbish. But what you might find is that their perception is, it's great. It's lovely. I really enjoyed it. But their actions throughout are very different in that they look confused. They struggled with basic, you know, next interactions. They were going back and forth in the journey and that type of thing. So it's really important to actually gauge what they perceived their experience to be versus what you saw it to be. And that's why observing is super important. That's something that I'd always recommend when you are doing user testing, even if it's like guerrilla style user testing. Look at the user. I'm the type of user who it's written all over my face what I think, whereas what I say might be a bit polite. You can see in my face I'm confused or I'm frustrated or whatever it is. So I think in that scenario, I think it's really actually important to look at your user and understand their frustration or confusion, and then compare that to how they think they can rate their overall experience. Another one would be around maybe errors, so or mistakes that they might make in the journey. Again, it really depends on what it is, but given the interaction or the challenge that you've set the user, looking at the amount of mistakes that they make, and again comparing it to maybe your initial version to the new version and seeing, well, this is the number of mistakes made on this one versus the newer version. You're able to see clearly if your new version is an improvement. And then another one, I suppose, would be satisfaction level. So how satisfied was the user with this experience? And again, in this one, I think it is important to still go back and look at their facial expressions and their engagement and so on, because again, what you might find is that users are very inclined to be positive and complimentary of your work. Another way of getting around that is to actually give them dummy tasks at the beginning of a test. So what I would tend to do is I would give dummy tasks at the beginning and at the end, and my real test would be somewhere in the middle, depending on how I feel that user's interacting with the test. If I feel they understand what it is that I'm trying to test them on, I'll keep throwing them dummy tests until I feel they think they've done the dummy test or the real test. Then I'll throw it in. So I think it's really important to have a lot of different scenarios ready, depending on how that user is behaving in the test. So I think, yeah, satisfaction level is another one. They're kind of my top ones, I think. I don't know if there's any that you think would be additional to that.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much it on the metrics. And regarding tools, we can't really recommend any tools, but a lot of those things are kind of mentioned in Soumya's video, in Louis' video. So these kind of tools, like for heat mapping, for card sorting exercises, voting. Like there are different providers, and you can search for them.
There is additional resources then, I think, below the video on the website as well.
All right, thanks so much again for that, guys. So just one quick add-on question, right? So at least in my experience in the past, I think what tends to happen is that people tend to derive quantitative analysis out of qualitative research, saying that 7 out of 10 people found this a problem. Is that a good practice to have, or or do you rely purely on qualitative signals only?
Can you repeat that question?
Sure. So the question was, I mean, in terms of deriving quantitative insights out of qualitative research. So sometimes you could have that, people are saying you conduct a research of, let's say, 10 people, you're doing an interview, and then there's 7 out of 10 people are facing this problem. But that does not mean that 70% of the people are facing the problem, right? So how do you, how do you be mindful of that?
Yeah, it definitely does not represent the entire population, right? We are always looking for personas to represent our audience, and that's the way how we are hiring them. But it does not mean that it exactly reflects on our audience. And this is, only with the quantitative data you would get the picture of the facts, right, of what's really going on. The reason why we are doing the qualitative research and qualitative methods is because we are trying to understand what are the problems there, right? So it's gonna just probably, like, if 70% of people would have a problem there, we would say, well, we probably need to look into that, right? More than half. So that kind of facts would be important for us to understand what the problem and to acknowledge that, right? It doesn't not necessarily mean that this is going to be reflecting exactly the picture.
And I think, as well, just to add to that, I think that, again, it was mentioned in one of the videos from the what is this? The CRO. It's early morning in Dublin. I think that what's really important is that the quantitative data can tell you the what, and the qualitative can tell you the why. So it's never a case of one or the other. These go hand in hand, and it's really important that you don't choose one over the other. These work together. So your data might tell you there's a trend or there's a problem here, and then when you do the likes of the user testing, you can dig deeper into the rationale behind that. And sometimes it's only when you get that rationale you're able to come up with the potential fixes for it. So I think the data can tell you the what, and the user can tell you the why, and that's why bringing these two together is really, really important.
Yeah, fair enough. Makes sense. So moving on to the next question. So this is a question about stakeholder management, and I know Anna and Lou, you guys covered a little bit of that in your talk. But how do you get stakeholders? It could be PMs, it could be CMOs, it could be CEOs. How do they get them to listen to UX? And another question related to design sprints is essentially how do you define, or what is the best practice in terms of explaining the goal of an exercise? to the team while conducting a design sprint? Because sometimes the goal might be either sometimes it could be pretty generic, and sometimes the feedback could be this makes no sense, and you feel forcing the team to do something. So how do you typically handle goals during design sprints and then stakeholder management?
I can take the stakeholder management one, I think. So in my experience, the best way of addressing this is through demonstrating potential impact. So a lot of the time, UX can be dismissed as some fluffy, nice to have, which it's definitely not. And I think the best way of demonstrating the impact of that is by showing, in your business specifically. I mean, it's great to show case studies and it's great to show data points externally, but there is nothing more powerful than showing the impact for your organization. So what I mean by that is actually going through a mini CRO cycle, even in a week, and demonstrating how UX was integral to the growth and the opportunity that came about because of that, and showing the endpoint at the end of that week. So for example, I actually used to do this in previous roles, where if we felt CROs and UX were really, really necessary for a client, what we do is we'd spend a week working intensively on a particular problem, and we do the likes of the user testing throughout, and we do the qualitative, quantitative together. And at the end of the week, we would have a new design based on our user feedback, and we'd be able to demonstrate the likes of the completion time, the satisfaction rate, and so on. I think if you go to someone and you're able to demonstrate how that will directly impact their business, it's a much stronger case than just saying, I think UX would be brilliant. So my recommendation here would be to demonstrate impact internally by taking a day or two and working on that, even if there's no allocated time or budget on it. The best way of doing it sometimes is just by taking that time yourself and working on it and showing what the potential impact or output could be from that. In my experience, that's been the best way of bringing people around, because we can all list the benefits of UX and the benefits of analytics and so on. Until you see how it directly impacts your business, it can be a difficult thing to buy into. So I would invest in, even if it's in your spare time, putting a little bit of effort into this to show what that impact can be. I think it can really help. And also, I suppose, partnering with external consultants and agencies who are able to come in and bring in those additional resources and budget that you might not have, and showing what they can do in a week. Investing in something like that might be a bit more plausible to a stakeholder than investing in an internal team. So I'd look externally for resources and maybe internally, and also looking at where you fit within the CRO maturity framework. So I wouldn't, if I was new to CRO, I really wouldn't be pitching, let's get user testing labs, let's have data analysts in here. That's just, it's so unrealistic for where you are. So it's really important to understand what is realistic for your current budget and business size. And so realistically, what can we actually achieve here? And pitching that is more likely to get you buy-in than, kind of pitching big kind of ideas. I hope that helps.
Rajesh, would you mind repeating the question on design sprints once again?
Sorry,
yeah.
I went on a
No, I
tangent.
just I was trying to summarize my thoughts on that, and then I realized that most of them.
No, sure. So the design sprint question is that, I think, let me just summarize the question. So it's about how do you come up with a well-defined goal for a design sprint, because sometimes it could also be pretty generic, or it could, the goal could be having a better experience for the customer. So how do you have specific goals that all the different stakeholders can buy in? So just as an example, let's say I'm working for a travel e-commerce company that also has on-ground operations and call center agents. But are they really bought into, let's say, having a great conversion rate or a payment success rate, right? So how do you ensure that there is a goal that is acceptable for everyone, and everybody understands the primary goal of design sprints?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question, and I can say that from my experience of running design sprints, it's really one of the most crucial parts is to define a really, really good goal that will be relevant for everyone. And this is actually it's a foundation of the success of the sprint. And I think the key approach here is to the goal of the sprint should be to solve a certain problem. You should never do the sprint just for the sake of the sprint, just to get people together, to, as you say, improve conversion rate, improve the experience. It should always be focusing on a certain problem. For example, our conversion rate on the landing page is this, but the quality of leads that we are getting on this landing page is poor. So let's maybe look into keeping the same conversion rate, but increasing the leads quality. How can we get that, right? And then once you start brainstorming on this kind of problem, you're opening to all the possible outcomes, scenarios. You may end up not working on the landing page redesign. You may end up working on on the back end, or on the marketing channels, or on something else, on the personalization experience. So it can be really, really different ones. And sometimes really even, the sprint focus, the sprint challenge is being changed during the sprint, but it always has to be around a certain problem, and this problem has to be relevant for all departments that are kind of being represented at the sprint. So everybody has to come there and agree to invest this amount of time and efforts into this problem, because it's their problem as well. They're facing this on the day-to-day basis. They just have a different perspective on it, right? So the customer support may be receiving a lot of requests, feature requests. Then at the same time, marketing may have few ideas around how they can leverage recent marketing research study. Eng may, have some problems with an old backend, and they do want to change a few things on their end as well. So it has to be everyone's problem and the business problem as well. Yeah. This makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. Thank you so much for that. And which brings me to another favorite question of mine, right? And I think this is a favorite question that I've got for this seminar as well, which is, when we do CRO, right, the sky is always the limit for how much you can improve the conversion rate, right? But then you spend so much time in doing user research, and you do a lot of hard work, and then the conversion rate is only, let's say, increased by 0.02%. So how do you estimate, what is a good increase in conversion rate, and how do you come up with a good standard for what should be the ideal conversion rate for your industry? And Anna, Lou, open for both of you.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. First of all, there are no benchmarks really for conversion rates. It so much depends on the industry, so much depends on the business model, and it's really hard to compare. But what I can really agree with that is phrased in this question, that quite often we do a lot of CRO and A/B tests and improvements, UX research, and then we see like plus 1% improvement in the conversion rate. So that is actually something that gets a lot of people discouraged from the CRO process, and it shouldn't. It's really, because of this one test, you won 1% of conversions of the revenue or something else. With the next one, you're going to win another one. And it's all about this constant optimization, constant improvement, and constant search for small wins. And all in all, across pages, they're going to sum up into something significant, right? And again, plus 1%, it can be a small number if you look into this short term, but if you extrapolate that, and if you look at your what potential revenue it can bring you throughout the upcoming year. So if you do like a forecast and bring this to the management, well, we did just these few changes, and all in all, it brought us plus X amount of revenue. It's probably going to be a big number. So do maybe look into other perspectives on these small numbers. And maybe another approach that we sometimes recommend to companies that struggle on seeing impact of this from the CRO, and they get back to us with saying like, oh, it's just like plus 1% increase. Sometimes the approach to go is when you, for example, have done a design sprint, or you just decided in general how your checkout should be redesigned, how it should look like, how it should change, that multiple changes are necessary at the same time, right? So you launch them all. You don't wait, you test, you don't test them one by one, you launch them all, you do like a split test of the old version and the new one. You see the immediate impact from all changes all together, and it kind of psychologically, it's easier for us to see this outcome. But after that, you have to do the reverse testing. You have to, each of these kind of changes, so separately, the image, the call to action, like the copy, you have to check against the old one. So you have to make sure that all of these changes that you have launched are good ones, are positively improving the user experience, or maybe you can change them to something else which can improve the conversion rate even more.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
So I think this is, again, a really, really common question that comes in, but I think what's really important is that, yes, everyone wants to improve their conversion rate, but what you need to do in order to be able to really improve your conversion rate is understand what the potential blockers are for the user. And understanding what they are is a really difficult process. And that is why CRO is an ongoing process. So it's something that it's over time, very small incremental changes should have a positive impact on, but it can take a lot of time and effort to understand what they are. What you should notice is that, yes, conversion rate is like the goal, but you should have your metrics and your KPIs within that should be related to the ongoing challenges for the user that you have identified through your ongoing research. And what you should notice is that the KPIs and metrics within that should be jumping a little bit more so than, say, 1%, because you should be directly working on that particular issue. The secondary impact of that is the conversion rate. But for example, you might notice that a particular field within a form on the checkout is really difficult for the user to interact with. So it might take a little bit of time and reiteration within working within that field to be able to see a positive impact on the number of users who are getting to the next step. And once you're able to work on that problem and figure out what all of the pain points are and what's the best kind of sweet spot for the client, you move on. The conversion rate might not be directly impacted by that improvement, but when you move on and you figure out what the next one is, over time, what happens is it starts to incrementally get better. But the KPIs and metrics that you should be looking at should be increasing an awful lot more. So the engagement, for example, with the forum should get a lot better because you're directly impacting the pain point for the user. That's why having the likes of a measurement plan is really important. Just looking at your conversion rate alone, it's going to make your life really, really difficult. It's about splitting it up, understanding the different journeys, the different pain points, the rationale behind them, the data behind them, the research behind them. CRO is really hard. We said it on one of the webinars, it's not easy. It takes a lot of resources, it takes a lot of time. And you need to be able to understand the rationale behind the user behavior in order to be able to improve it. And that's something that happens over, it can take years sometimes, depending on what those pain points are, depending on the technology, the back end that you're using, and so on. So we can't emphasize the importance in keeping at it. If you're finding that the team is demoralized because the overall conversion rate isn't improving as dramatically as you would like, you need to look back at the KPIs and the metrics, and you need to be celebrating the success within those, because they should be directly correlating over time then to the conversion rate.
Thanks so much for that, and Lou. And I think another thing that I would like to add to this is that sometimes the results have a shelf life. So let's say you ran an experiment around 6 months back, and you saw a particular version working better, or you saw a particular insight from the customer. Might not necessarily hold true 6 months later as well, because the ecosystem changes so fast. The expectations of the users also change pretty rapidly. Somebody who's not even your direct competitor or in your direct industry might be doing something that they would start expecting from other industries and other services as well. So it is important to build the rigor, as Lou and Lou and Anna both said. It's important to build the rigor and keep doing it as a practice and not just like a one-time event. So I think we just have 2 more minutes. So we'll quickly take one live question. and we'll end with that. So I think so. There are a couple of questions that we got, Anna and Louis. Essentially those are all around best practices. So the questions is around, what are your thoughts on pop-ups, or is multiple tabs recommended, or what works best, chats or forms? I think the answer for all of these are pretty, are in the same line. So yeah, over to you guys, Anna or Lou.
Yeah, on the pop-ups, I think it's really hard again to say without the context, without seeing an example, because the recommendations that we constantly give to different companies are based on our actual testing on the website. I would say pop-ups may be disturbing sometimes if they don't keep the user within the context, right? If they're pushing something out of the blue, or it's very, very clear that they're rushing the user into commitment. I went into this example in one of the pre-recorded videos on UX best practices, when you are rushing the user into commitment, but they're not just ready to be there yet. And this is where the user research is actually really helpful. You kind of understand where the users are in their journey at this point of time, and you are showing messages to them accordingly. Sometimes pop-ups can be good, and we also saw in the same best practices video examples on pop-up when, for example, the user adds the something like an item to the cart, and then you show a pop-up window saying, well, your item has been added. This is actually a really good feedback on users' action, right? They've done something, and then the system tells them this is done. And then it's also a great opportunity for your business to do an upsell. So again, I think regarding pop-ups, like it depends on what is really there, what kind of things you communicate in the pop-up. What are you pushing there? Something are you not really pushing? So is it all smooth in there? I think also that the way you design, the way the UI design of the pop-up, it's really important in terms of like the animation transitions, how smoothly it appears and disappears. Is it not a distraction? Is it a distraction? There is also a really cool talk by Luke Wroblewski at the Conversions at Google channel on obvious design, and he talks about designing pop-up overlays at the onboarding process, that they're really being ignored by the user. The users want to get them closed, and he shows a lot of best practices on how you should design the UI so that users don't dismiss the pop-up, they actually pay attention to it. So the key point that he is referencing there is that it should look natively to the UI. It shouldn't actually look as a pop-up. It should appear within the context and within the UI. Yeah, so that's my view on pop-up. I don't know anything else.
I know from my experience with pop-ups, the amount of discounts that I have not got because a pop-up comes into my face, I hate it, and I instantly look for the X. So I think the way in which, like what you've said, the way in which it's designed is so important, because even offering the user a discount, sometimes it's not enough. I'm forever not getting my discount because I hate the pop-up in my face. So I think with all of these types of questions, I think the way in which it's designed is crucial, and the best way to, again, figure out what the best design would be is through the likes of user testing.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And just to add to that, I think so the last session that we had was on UX best practices. So if you guys have any questions on that, please feel free to view the video on the channel, and a lot of your questions might be answered. And yeah, at the end, you need to experiment and figure out what works best for your guys and for your service. And for that, please feel free to join us next week. We have Google Analytics for UX and measuring success. It starts at around 4 p.m. Singapore time and 1:30 India time. So please make sure please join us for this session. And with that, we wrap up this session. Thank you so much, Anna and Lou, for a very insightful and very interesting session. I'm sure there was a lot of key takeaways that our audience would go away with. And once again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Do not forget we have a hashtag for all the social media feedback that you can provide us with. See you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, guys. Bye.